The conclusion of Joel Miller's story in The Last of Us Part 1 is also the inciting incident for Abby Anderson's story in The Last of Us Part 2. The murder of Dr. Jerry Anderson. For Joel, one of the final obstacles in the way of saving Ellie's life. For Abby, the end of her world, as she lost her father, and in the wake of this, the organisation and cause in which she had grown up completely collapsed. It's often said that Abby's and Joel's journeys in the two games are essentially the same, mirrors of one another. And there's a sense in which that's true, certainly in terms of the choice that both make, and who enters their lives to allow them to change enough to make that choice. But just as there are parallels, so there are also inversions. Joel and Abby's choices taking them in different directions, with different lessons to learn, even if they broadly end up at the same point with the same choice. But to talk more about that, let's start at the beginning. For both characters, that beginning was the loss of a family member, the violence and trauma of that moment shaping the person that they would become. But the more obvious symbolic opposite, Joel being a father who lost a daughter, versus Abby being a daughter who lost a father, also points to a deeper opposition between where the two stand. Joel lost Sarah because whoever gave the order to the soldier blocking their path decided that their lives did not weigh up against the greater good, in this case preventing the further spread of the infection. Abby lost Jerry because, when he and the Fireflies made the same decision regarding Ellie, Joel refused to accept it. Both losses occurred in the same fundamental scenario, the decision that the lives of the many outweigh the lives of the few. But where Sarah died because the Federal soldiers saw that decision through, Jerry died because Joel stopped him from doing so. I make this point not to make a moral judgment on the two deaths. Whatever moral philosophy you subscribe to, and whoever you think had the right of it, doesn't change the fact that the family Joel and Abby lost were on opposite sides of the same fundamental conundrum, and that this in turn likely contributed to their reactions following very different paths. Joel did not seek revenge. After Joel's death, when debating pursuing Abby's crew to Seattle, Ellie says, "If it were you or me, Joel would be halfway to Seattle already." Tommy immediately disagrees, and both the director's commentary and the deleted line reveal that Joel didn't even go after the soldiers who killed Sarah. While we know from the first game the lengths that Joel would go to in order to save a still living Ellie, and it's therefore fair to say that Abby's crew would not survive Joel catching them in the act, it's also pretty definitive that he would not pursue them to Seattle. Just one illustration of this point is during the Pittsburgh section of the game, when Joel finds a note written by an angry mother who lost her son to Fedra just as Joel lost Sarah. That mother's anger leads her to join the uprising that overthrows the military, seeking blood for blood. Joel's response upon reading the note is,
With that kind of thinking, no one wins.
Rather than seeking revenge, we know that Joel instead shut a part of himself down. There are strong hints that he attempted suicide, but was unable to follow through. Instead, he chose survival above and before all else. This led him down an extremely dark path, committing similar acts of violence to those by the hunters in Pittsburgh in order to keep himself and Tommy alive. It was a time that gave Tommy nightmares, and ultimately led to a years-long rift between the two. Even as a smuggler, his ability to commit violence earns him a fearsome reputation, acting in effect as an enforcer on Tessa's orders. But it remained a pragmatic violence, doing what he saw as necessary to survive in this world, and he remained dismissive of causes such as the Fireflies, and seeing hope as a false promise, one Marlene used to take his brother away from him. By contrast, while Abby also follows a path of violence, for her it's a violence justified by a cause. Joel killing her father also led to the demise of the Fireflies, and so as she set her mind on seeking justice, she also committed herself wholly to the closest thing she could find to the Fireflies, another revolutionary militia in the form of the WLF, and adopted their hatred for their enemies the Seraphites, a hate matched only by her hate for Joel. And while Tommy rejected Joel's violence, stating outright that it wasn't worth it, For a long time, Abby's then boyfriend Owen and their friends in the Salt Lake crew stood by his side. They all joined the WLF together, and in the intervening 4 years stood loyal to it and to each other, even to the point of following her to Jackson for revenge. Owen had his issues with it, and particularly with Abby's obsessive pursuit of Joel, which is why the two break up. But he still holds a candle for her, despite his obvious reservations with her path, and feels powerless to do anything but come with her to Jackson because of the promise he had made that they would do this together. He does try and talk her out of it as they stand looking out over the city, but this is by then far too late, and she is committed. Even then, in the face of the violence she commits against Joel, most of the crew stick with her. Manny and Nora broadly seem to support what happened. Manny suggesting that Mel's discomfort with it is because she's a medic rather than a grunt. Nora using her defiant refusal to repent as a way to goad Ellie into making a mistake so she can flee.
That little bitch got what he deserved.
You fucking...
Owen is shook up enough to avoid Abby, and it pushes his ultimate desertion from the WLF as a result of his fatigue with their war. But even then, he still wants Abby to come with him, away from it all, and never truly gives up on her. Only Mel, also fatigued with war, but at the same time aware of Owen's desires regarding Abby, even as they prepare to have a child together, turns on her in a way similar to how Tommy turned on Joel. But this doesn't happen at the same point in their journeys, and we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. With Tommy gone, Joel's remaining human connection is Tess, though whatever warmth they share is frosted over by the nature of their work as smugglers and the hardness and distance that Joel believes he needs in order to survive. This view of the world is challenged when Tess is bit, and she implores him to protect Ellie and take her on from Boston to Jackson in search of Tommy, and ultimately in service of the cause to find a cure to the cordyceps virus. Joel doesn't buy into the cause, but as Tess says, there's enough between them that he pushes on through a sense of obligation. When Abby confronts Owen in his boat at the aquarium, it's almost the same conflict, but with different outcomes. Owen wants to pursue the rumours of the Fireflies in the west, much as Tess wanted Joel to go west in search of them. But where Tess was imploring Joel to act because she couldn't, and to take up a cause that he didn't believe in, Owen wanted him and Abby to go together, abandoning the cause that they were sworn to in favour of another. And where Joel reluctantly takes on Tess's wish, albeit to throw it aside at the end in order to save his found family, Abby refuses Owen, even if she adopts his wish after his death, in order to seek a new life for her found family. But Abby also doesn't just go back to life in the WLF. Instead, she goes back in search of Lev and Yara, enemies she's sworn to fight, because she finds herself fearing what might happen to them. When Joel took on Ellie, it was just as another smuggling job, and he tries to keep himself cold and distant, even while wrestling with the fact that he finds himself caring about her, even early on, and this only intensifies as they spend more time together, something that he struggles to come to terms with. Abby cares and wants to do right by Lev and Yara from the off, bonded through their shared near-death experience in the forest, and haunted by the fate they saved her from, and the possibility that it might become their fate. What she wrestles with isn't the attachment to others, but what that means for her loyalty to the WLF.
What the hell am I doing? They're fucking scars.
She avoids Lev's questions about her actions as a soldier, yet finds herself at his insistence calling her longtime enemies Seraphites instead of the more derogatory scars. She doesn't try to explain her situation to Nora or to Manny, recognizing that they wouldn't understand, yet avoids the question of returning to the WLF, seemingly holding to the idea that she can square the circle between saving these kids, who are ostensibly the enemy, and her own side's fanaticism in its war. Joel's inner conflict over his attachment to Ellie comes to a head as they confront each other in the wake of Ellie running away. he justifies handing her over to Tommy as the safest option, refusing to hear her objections, but ultimately changes his mind at the last and instead decides to accept his attachment and see their journey through together. Abby's conflict over her loyalty to the WLF culminates in her facing Isaac on the Seraphite Island. She tries to reason her way out, still talking as if her loyalties can be reconciled, until Isaac points a gun at Lev and demands that she step aside. That is where she comes to the realization that she has already made her choice and refuses to move. Though they are saved and get the chance to flee as a result of Yara's final sacrifice, the important moment here is when she makes the same choice as Joel makes at the end of the first game and refuses to stand aside when men with guns have decided that a child's life doesn't weigh up against the greater good. Joel's decision to stick with Ellie comes after a confrontation with Tommy where, justifying his course of action, Joel is met with harsh truths about who he was and the things he has done. Abby's equivalent of this is when Mel turns on her. Their stances are inverted, Tommy saying he won't take Ellie off Joel's hands, while Mel says Abby should get out of Lev and Yara's lives. But both offer the characters a reckoning for who they are and what they've done, before a key moment where they commit to a better path. In both cases, that better path has its consequences. After committing to Ellie, Joel again faces the same threat that he faced with Sarah at the start of the game. This time, however, he is equipped to deal with it and can rescue Ellie from her fate. Even if this ultimately means that his actions will come back to haunt him years later in the form of Abby's vengeance. For him, Ellie's distrust and the rift that opened between them in those years was the greater consequence, and as much as that hurt him, it was still a small price to pay for the fact that he got to save her life. Abby, on the other hand, finds herself on the opposite side of the situation where she lost her dad. Jerry stood between Joel and Ellie, scalpel in hand, urging Joel to think of all the lives that would be saved with Ellie's sacrifices. Earlier on, he spoke of all the atrocities by the Fireflies that would be finally justified with this one act. On Seattle Day 1, Isaac had similarly justified the genocide of the Seraphites as the only path to peace, as anything else risked a truce that would inevitably be broken. On Day 3, he stood with a gun aimed at Lev, telling Abby that it would all work out, but first she must get out of the way of the shot. Like her father, she stood between an armed man and a child, but she was far more like the armed man, Joel, than her father, ready to do whatever it took, not for the greater good, but to save a single life. The consequences for her were more immediate, if ultimately less deadly, than for Joel. The entire WLF turned against her, ready to kill her for her betrayal, but she survived them. Joel's shadow still hung over her, however, as his story was not just a reflection of hers, but a prelude to it, and Ellie had taken her revenge on Abby's friends. Once again, she was driven by the corpses of those she loved to seek retribution. But where Joel would do what he did all over again, motivated as it was by love for the child he sought to save, Abby ultimately chose to pull back and break the cycle because of her love for the child she had saved.
Abby.
Joel unleashed all he had for the sake of Ellie, and Abby held back for the sake of Lev. Yet as different as those actions were, their motive was the same, and both offered redemption from the mistakes and failures of their pasts. Finally, Joel carrying an unconscious Ellie away from the Firefly lab was the culmination of his story, but with unseen consequences still to come. Whereas Abby carrying an unconscious Lev away from the pillars in Santa Barbara was also a conclusion to her story, at least for now. But once the fight with Ellie was done, Ellie here also getting the opportunity to pull back and end the cycle of violence. The consequences of Abby's actions were already behind her, and the future, as hinted at by the new start screen on the beach facing Catalina Island, offers hope. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. Like the video that's just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, so if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.